A factory mix-up spoils a huge batch of vaccines. Corporate backlash growing against Georgia's voting law. And baseball is back. It's opening day in America. Thursday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Thursday, April 1st. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Carlo, good morning.
Welcome back, Wags. How we doing over there?
Everything's good. Thank you for holding down the fort. I appreciate it.
Of course. My pleasure. Good to have you back. And happy April Fool's Day to you and to everybody. A day to avoid the internet at all costs.
And it feels kind of weird in the office today, Carlo, because, people are coming back today.
Really? At Cheddar?
April Fools!
Oh, that's pretty good. That was pretty good.
I should have kept it going longer. I said to my husband yesterday, I'm like, what can my April Fools be for Carlo? And I'm like, I don't know if there's anything. And then I kind of came up with that one.
I would have believed you, and I would have shown up to the office tomorrow.
Seriously, Carlo, where are you? Why are you at work? I mean, why are you at home? You're supposed to be here. Okay.
Well played.
Let's get to some kind of breaking news. This broke in the New York Times last night. There was a mix-up at a Baltimore factory that has now ruined as many as 15 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, delaying future shipments of the one-dose shot as the FDA investigates what happened. It's said to be blamed on human error. It does not affect any of the Johnson & Johnson shots that are currently out in circulation right now. Meanwhile, Pfizer says that its vaccine 100% effective in adolescents, apparently, which is even more effective than it is in adults at preventing infection. They're hoping to be able to offer older children that vaccine before the start of the school year in the fall, pending approval. Meanwhile, France is going into a month-long lockdown, its third, as cases rise and hospitals fill back up. Europe continues to suffer from a botched vaccine rollout that is just not keeping pace with a rising tide of infections.
It's been a big month for people messing up at their jobs, right? You got the guys in the boat, these factory workers who are subcontractors for J&J. I mean, this was bound to happen at some level, I think, some kind of mix-up like that. But yikes, 15 million doses. That is a big mess up. Still, we so over-procured in terms of just getting vaccines and buying them in the beginning that it probably won't matter too much in terms of supply. I don't think it's going to cause like a big delay. Not that it's good news. But what is good news is that Pfizer study, which was breaking as I was doing the pod yesterday, so we just missed it. That's just fabulous about adolescents. They're the cohort that spread the virus, right? Or among the cohorts that spread the virus. And we need them to get to herd immunity. There's a lot of teenagers in this country, right? So that's just fabulous news. I think the hard part is going to be convincing some parents of 12 to 15-year-olds to get them vaccinated, just if they have any vaccine hesitancy generally, because, the virus isn't particularly dangerous to that age group, but they're still vectors of spread, right?
I think that you make a great point there. I actually took a survey. News 12, our sister station on Long Island, had a survey saying, if you're a parent, will you get your kid vaccinated if it's available? And the results, 70% said no. So
really?
And obviously, I don't know the sample size. I could have been, it could have been 10 people that took it, but I wasn't surprised by that.
Ugh.
Given the fact that, as you say, that kids don't really have they tend to not have as bad of consequences with it. Johnson & Johnson, by the way, saying, they're obviously, this is not a good thing for the company, but they're pointing to it as obviously our controls are working. You know what I mean? They're obviously the things we're doing to test and make sure that these vaccines are safe, that's in place. We're not cutting corners here. Geez, that was a headline that I thought was hopefully going to be an April Fool's, gotcha, from the
right.
New York Times. But
well,
15 million
God.
is not small potatoes, Carlo, especially when that's 15 million people, not 7.5. If it was
exactly.
the other one, it's 2 doses that you need.
Exactly. And also just I just lost my train of thought there. I hate when that happens. But I don't know. I forget. Go on. One of those days.
I got a vaccine, Carlo, which is good news.
What?
I went to Jones Beach and I got vaccinated, or I got my first.
Get the heck out of here.
I did, and it was wonderful, and I was so highly impressed with
Oh, that's
the way
fantastic.
that everything went. It was like a finely run operation.
Was
You
it
go
was
in.
it FEMA?
I believe it's the state. It was National Guard.
Yeah.
You go in, you show an ID, they take your temperature, ask you a few questions. You don't even get out of your car. I rolled down my window. They said, which arm? Rolled down the window, popped it,
Which one
my left, because I'm a righty. I mean,
No,
my
I mean,
arm
which
does hurt.
which vaccine?
Oh, Pfizer. I was like,
Okay.
my left arm. And then you wait. They basically write on your windshield what time you're allowed to leave, because you have to wait for 15 minutes just to make sure
Yeah.
that you don't have any adverse reaction. The guy was like, don't panic. I have, like, no one yet in
Yeah.
all of these months has had a reaction that they haven't been able to leave. And then they just kind of wave you off when they see that your numbers, you wait in the parking lot, and then you cruise away. It's amazing.
fantastic.
I was so overly impressed with the operation, I have to tell you.
That's so great. I'm going on Saturday to get my first Pfizer dose, so we're gonna be living the good life soon, Jill. Things are looking up.
I know. I said to my husband, I'm like, should I start looking at restaurants? Like, I don't even know
Yeah.
what that means for our lives to be vaccinated.
I mean, not to belabor this, but just think about what that means, right? What that means to you is that in about 5 weeks, there will be a 0% chance that the worst things that could happen from COVID will happen to you, right? That's the way you got to look at it. And that is a friggin' miracle.
It's quite liberating. All right, let's switch gears. The NYPD has now arrested a suspect in that brutal beating of a Filipino immigrant near Times Square earlier this week. That attack certainly shocking the country. The attack was caught on camera. It shows a black man walking up to a 65-year-old woman and kicking her to the ground before stomping her head. He reportedly told her, "You don't belong here," as he walked away. The incident is one of several disturbing anti-Asian attacks in New York City in recent days. It happened outside of an apartment building in broad daylight and in front of several witnesses who did not appear to come to the woman's immediate aid.
Judge Hill, did you watch that video?
No, I can't.
Really,
I cannot watch this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me sick to my stomach. Actually,
Yeah,
I
no,
can't physically watch it.
it's really upsetting, and I have some thoughts on the actions of those bystanders that I was actually going to talk about. But then, you know what? I woke up this morning and I thought to myself, so often these videos don't show the full context of what happened, so I'm just going to hold off because who knows? It certainly looks like those people did not come to this woman's help when they could have, but we don't know yet, so let's just hold off. That said, the suspect in this case, he was previously convicted of murdering his mother and had been out on parole since 2019. You know, this story is, I just wanted to make sure that we got this in today. This guy was not somebody who was like driven by online radicalization, right? He wasn't like some guy who was like watching too many YouTube videos. Like, he was a hardened criminal who had clear psychological issues, who shouldn't have been on the streets. And those are the folks who commit the majority of these bias attacks. And I say this very delicately, just because I know that there's a lot of emotion in these stories. But, you know, hate crimes are not only committed by white people. Not every hate crime is a part of a narrative about white supremacy. In fact, most aren't. Most, if you just look at the crime statistics in New York City, nearly everybody arrested in bias attacks, or at least alleged bias attacks, is somebody with a long rap sheet. You know, somebody who probably shouldn't have either been released from prison or should have at least been getting psychological monitoring. I mean, I'm all about criminal justice reform. I truly am. But that includes getting emotionally disturbed criminals like this psychiatric help, right? And I feel like that's not necessarily getting through in sort of like some of the media narratives about these horrific stories.
I completely agree with you. And just for a little background, you and I had a discussion on, I asked you, do we need to mention the suspect's race? Like, do we need to mention that he's black? And you said, and you're correct, is that it is part of the story here.
Right.
You assume, I mean, when I heard about this, I have to admit, even I assumed it was going to be a white, kind of like a white national type of person
Right.
who committed the crime, and not so. They don't always fit that mold.
Yeah, very true.
Okay, two of the largest employers in Georgia have come out publicly against the state's new voter restrictions. The CEOs of Delta and Coca-Cola, both of which are headquartered in Atlanta, called the law unacceptable, saying that it amounts to a clear attempt at voter disenfranchisement. Georgia Republicans succeeded last week in passing a sweeping overhaul of how its elections are run, including making it a crime to hand out food or water to people waiting in line at the polls, and restrictions on ballot drop boxes, as well as new voter ID requirements, all of which opponents say is a thinly veiled attempt to suppress minority turnout.
Yeah, I don't think it's veiled at all. It's been pretty interesting to see how Hollywood has been not doing anything. They've been basically silent on this, which is interesting because Georgia has become sort of this mecca for film production. So the entertainment industry, it's usually pretty vocal when it comes to issues like this, but not this time. I guess it's easy to come out against something until it affects their ability to get tax credits. But we did talk a lot about this law last week. I just keep thinking, what does the current Republican Party in America stand for? Making it harder to vote? Like, it really is that what it wants to be known as? Like, this is incredible stuff. Like, instead of sitting down after the November election and looking at the raw data from that election, and there were some very encouraging signs for Republicans in that data, especially as it pertains to minority voters. And then what do? I mean, they could be trying to field sort of like a center-right candidate who isn't insane, maybe somebody who could moderate the left's penchant for going overboard on some of the virtue signaling that we're seeing. But no, they're doubling down on making it harder to people to vote, to the very voters that they're trying to appeal to. It's just incredible to me. And the cover that they use is that it's to protect people who feel like there was massive voter fraud in November, even though there wasn't. So it's just this big lie. It just keeps rolling. It just got it, Trump sort of like nudged the boulder down the hill, and now it just keeps on picking up moss.
Well, the interesting thing is that Delta originally came out and kind of was praising the new law. I don't know if you saw that, and then there was such an outcry against Delta that they're changing their tune.
I don't know why they hadn't been. I mean, this law to me seems pretty clear cut.
Okay, as of today, New Yorkers can legally possess marijuana and smoke it in public anywhere that smoking tobacco is allowed. So New York became the 15th state and one of the largest to officially legalize recreational cannabis for adult use. An embattled Governor Cuomo immediately signing that bill into law upon its passage yesterday. It's going to take more than a year for the state's regulated cannabis market to open. And when it does, 40% of the tax revenue it generates will be earmarked for minority communities that had disproportionate drug arrests over the years.
President Biden, why have you not descheduled marijuana yet? Are you listening, Mr. President? Are you listening to me? Has anybody asked him this in the press? Actually, I haven't seen it. He could do it today with the stroke of a pen. He could federally decriminalize marijuana today, this morning. No act of Congress needed. It would be popular. It would be easy. It would be the right thing to do. I don't really understand why he hasn't. I mean, Joe Biden, in all seriousness, probably single-handedly responsible for putting more young people of color in jail for smoking pot than maybe all but a handful of other Americans in history, just by virtue of him sponsoring that crime bill in the 90s. People are not going to be happy I said that, but it's true. So you'd think that he'd want to right that wrong. I'm not sure why federally he hasn't moved yet, especially because, federally decriminalizing marijuana doesn't mean that it's just like all drugs just become states can still decide what they want to do, right? And localities within those states can still decide they don't want to be part of this. But I don't get it.
College hoops taking a breather before the Final Four. In the meantime, play ball. The Yankees and the Blue Jays open the 2021 MLB season this afternoon at Yankee Stadium. All 30 teams play today, 15 games in all, as the league is trying to play a full 162-game season that's as close to normal and on schedule as possible. There will be butts in the seats this year. Every team planning for at least some number of fans to be in attendance, with the Texas Rangers opening up their ballpark to a capacity crowd of 40,000. President Biden has called that a mistake.
It seems like it is, but you know what? I don't know because Texas is in another planet apparently because they opened up, they lifted their mask mandate, and their cases are at their low. So I don't even know anymore. I don't know what to
What
make
is
of
going on
anything.
in Texas? Do we know though that the tests that enough people are being tested there? Like, is
I don't
testing
know.
way
Yeah,
down? And also,
that's a good
from
question
what
actually.
I'm hearing anecdotally in Texas, is that cities like Austin and Houston and a lot of cities, like, there's still mask mandates in place in most businesses. That just
Yeah,
because
that's true.
the
Right.
governor lifted the statewide mask mandate, they are still wearing masks. But it just
Yeah.
seems like counterintuitive. What is going on there that's so different? And maybe they don't have all of the variants yet. I don't know.
I think it's that. I think the weather has something to do with it. Florida's sort of the same case. I think the weather is actually going to end up being an underappreciated mitigating factor when all is said and done when we study this thing. That's just a gut feeling. I don't have any actual evidence of that, but
No, I mean, look, I very closely monitor New York numbers, and New
yeah,
York, so with cases are going up. The percentage positive rate is really high. It's almost higher than it was around Thanksgiving. And part of it is the variants, but we also are still doing, there are some days we have more than 200,000 tests being done. That is
yeah.
not, I believe, what's happening in most states that have turned testing facilities into vaccine facilities. So
No, that's a really good
I
point.
just don't know. And if it's a younger person who tests positive, they may just get, they probably don't have a severe case. And so
Yeah.
it just may never get logged. So I just don't know if the numbers are telling the full story.
I think that's a very good point. Anyway, back to baseball. It's
On a
opening day,
lighter
baby.
note,
All right, opening day, man. I love it. It's just a great reminder. Spring is here. The routine of the long baseball season is upon us. The Yanks are looking good this year. Dodgers looking good in the National League. Even the Mets, even the old Mets are actually looking good. They've got a new owner, sort of a new vibe. So yeah, it's going to be great. Going to be great to get some baseball action going on.
Netflix is ponying up close to $500 million for the next two Knives Out sequels, and it's an astonishing amount of money even for that company. The streamers reportedly agreed to pay $450 million for the rights to Knives Out 2 and Knives Out 3, both of which will reunite director Rian Johnson and actor Daniel Craig in this murder mystery franchise. The first Knives Out was a smash hit. It took in $311 million in the box office, and the budget for that just $40 million.
Somebody just really needs to explain the Netflix business model. There's that that there was that SNL skit a while back where it's just like them just with the huge pile of money on the conference table, just like Netflix executives throwing it at everybody. It really does feel like that's pretty much what's happening over there. I mean, I know that they spend $10 billion on content every year, but even at that level, this is $500 million for the rights to 4 hours of content. That's a lot of money, man. Plus the cost to actually make them. This is just the licensing. So I guess it's because franchises are so valuable in sort of like the movie-going sphere, and Netflix doesn't have a whole lot of them. So I guess that's the business strategy. And maybe I just underestimate Netflix's sheer scale. But man, that company spends money like they put cocaine addicts to shame.
All right, it's still early in the day, but Volkswagen certainly in the lead for the annual title of company that maybe took April Fool's Day too far. The automaker facing some backlash after admitting that its supposed name change to Volkswagen with a T, reported here at Cheddar and elsewhere as authentic, was indeed an early April Fool's stunt meant to promote the automaker's pivot to electric cars. I don't know what the backlash is. It's like, who cares?
Well, I think so. A bunch of people on Twitter noted that VW, they have this recent history in which they cheated on emissions tests and then they lied to regulators to cover it up. So I think people were sort of saying like maybe you guys should have sort of like a humbler, marketing division. Not to mention that whole other thing that they are known for. Yeah, but there have been in my estimation, since we're talking April Fool's Day, there have been exactly two funny April Fool's stunts in my lifetime. One was back in 1997 when Pat Sajak and Alex Trebek swapped hosting duties for Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but you can watch it on YouTube. It's very funny. The other one was back in 1989. This to me is still the all-time great. The local NBC station in Seattle, King 5, they actually broke into their morning programming with a fake special report that the Space Needle had collapsed. And they even had graphics that showed it like in rubble, and it looked so real that the entire city went into this panic. It was like War of the Worlds, like Orson Welles style. Unbelievable. You can watch that video on YouTube. Also, they had to come out and apologize. Just amazing that somebody approved that. But
that would
the
never fly, right?
Oh,
in
my
in
God.
2021, you'd be
Can you imagine?
canceled. You'd be sued. You could never
Yeah.
show your face. They'd have to go off air.
Yeah, the 80s, man. You could get away with a lot in the 80s.
And Carlo, before we go, tell us about Officer Eric Talley, one of the victims of the Colorado shooting.
Yeah. So Officer Talley, probably the best known of the victims at this point. He was the Boulder cop who rushed into that King Soopers supermarket immediately when the call went out that there was an active shooter. I don't know if you remember those cops down in Florida who didn't rush into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School in Parkland.
Oh, yes.
They sort of sat around and wait. Yeah, they sat around and waited for backup as those children were being slaughtered. This guy did the exact opposite of that. He put his life on the line. He didn't didn't give it a second thought, and he gave his life in the service to others. He was also a father to 7 children. And obviously he was a husband. He was a brother as well, and a son. And I really like this anecdote that I read from the chief of the Boulder Police, who said that Officer Talley made a point to teach all of his kids CPR. And when one of his little boys swallowed a quarter by accident, his brother actually saved his life with the CPR that he was taught by his dad. I just hope to be a father like that. So Officer Talley, he died an American hero at the age of 51.
Carlo, thank you for that. And just we'll end it on a lighter note. That is what you need to know, of course, for Thursday, April 1st. And everybody, be careful out there. Watch out for tricksters.
Yes.
And
yes, dirty tricksters like Jill.
Actually, there was a survey really quick. I got a press release from a company that was saying they did a poll and they found 2% of people lose a friend over an April Fool's joke. Like they expect, like they'll like a joke that had gone way too far that they do not become friends with that person. So that's 1 in 50 people. I think that's a lot.
Yeah, I'll say.
Those
I mean,
are
maybe
serious,
that's going to be.
like, what are the jokes? I want to know.
Well, I'll tell you what. I would be one of those people if I actually hauled my butt into work tomorrow because you told me to. That would have been the end of you and I.
Today, I would. You'd be like, Becky, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. We'll talk to you manana.